Hi, I'm Richard Norton. Welcome to Kapow TV. I'm here with my guest tonight, Steve Percival. Steve was the actual first official UFC referee here in this country. Runs a gym in New South Wales in Penrith called Ultimate Martial Arts, and thrilled to have you here, Steve. Thanks.
Thank you, Richard. Thank you for having me.
Now, Steve, I want to start off with a topic that's been very much in the news for us here in Victoria, in that, you know, the cage, of course, is legal in certain states with the UFC, in other states, but in Victoria, it's running into obstacles. Ken Lay, the police commissioner, has come out and said that he would oppose the approval of the cage. What's your view on that?
I don't understand why they're opposed to the cage. MMA is existing in Victoria. They're using MMA. MMA is happening in a ring. I don't understand why they're opposed to the cage. The cage is basically a safety enclosure. That's the way we look at it. And it's basically to keep the fighters in, because, as you are aware, the grappling styles and the wrestling and the pushing against the cage, it makes it a safety venue. So the idea is to keep the combatants in and safe. Whereas if it's a ring, you know, the combatants can go outside the ring through the ropes and possibly injure themselves even worse than if they're in the fight.
And by the way, for those who don't know, again, I mentioned briefly about Steve's career, but again, he's the man as far as referee in the UFC arena. So for somebody to be right there in the middle of the action, I mean, nobody would know better than Steve as far as the safety ramifications of a cage or not having a cage. And so, do you think, what about, and we're getting into a slightly different area about, what about, how do you know, and this is, I know you'd be obviously biased in one direction, but what about the look of MMA for the general community? What's your thoughts on that?
I can totally understand how people think it's a barbaric sport. I mean, to the untrained, that's how it looks. But these fighters are athletes. They're training 2-3 times a day, sometimes each session is 2 hours, so that they can get in that cage and give a performance. And they're training in multiple disciplines. They're not just training in one style, and they're certainly not street thugs. You know, I've met so many elite UFC fighters, and one of the first ones I ever met was Wanderlei Silva, and I've never met a more humble man and quietly spoken man. And just, you know, going back on the cage aspect and the enclosure, if you consider every kids' trampoline these days comes out with a net, and it's basically to keep the kids safe by stopping them from falling out of the net, you know, off the trampoline.
Yeah.
I mean, every house has a fence, and the idea is to keep people out and to keep people in. So I don't understand. I still don't understand the resistance. I know the minister and that they're trying to look at safety, but I don't understand the resistance for the cage. The concern I have too is, like, after all these experts are telling the ministers that, you know, it's safer to have a cage, what happens then if a fighter goes outside, it goes through the ropes of a ring and injures himself badly? Is that going to impact MMA, or is that going to impact on the Victorian government?
So Steve, you know, again, we're talking about all the argument from someone like yourself that's informed, you're a referee, you've been in the mix of it. Are people in power, in other words, the ones that have the responsibility of deciding whether a cage is legalised or not, do they actually access people like you? I mean, it's in New South Wales, you're working there, but you're officiating all around the country. Would they ask somebody for you to come in and give your opinion on something like that? Because, you know, again, like we're saying, a lot of the objections seem to be just the barbaric look of the cage. Not, well, the rules are the same, you're going to bash each other the same if that's the way you're looking at it. Yep. Do they get people like yourself in to have some input?
Well, they haven't talked to me at all. I always make myself available for anyone who needs to know anything about mixed martial arts or the officiating or generally the rules. And so I'd be happy to come down here and talk to the minister, or talk to whoever I need to talk to inform them of what's happening and how safe the cage is. I mean, I helped get this thing started in New South Wales, you know, and I talked to the government up there, and I'm a sanctioning organisation in New South Wales. I've also been flown over to South Australia to discuss it with the Commission there, and at the moment I'm up for approval over there as a sanctioning organisation. And they're very proactive, and they want to hear from experts. And unfortunately, the Victorian government haven't called me and haven't talked to me, but I'd be more than willing to spend a bit of time and speak to whoever I need to.
Because it's a bit unfortunate with such a popular sport when it becomes a bit of a political football, doesn't it? I mean, you have Labor saying yes, they'll allow it, but the police commissioner, no, I'm going to oppose it. You've got the Liberals saying they're opposing it. It gets in the way, doesn't it, of what is such a popular sport, And I think,
absolutely, and it's no different to any other sport, really. I mean, there's been boxing, kickboxing, Muay Thai. That's been around for many years, but for some reason the spotlight is on mixed martial arts, and they're using that politically, and which is a shame for me as an advocate for mixed martial arts, and that's a shame because I see positives coming from it, not negatives. And it is a rough, tough sport. There's no issues there, but we are trying to keep it as safe as possible, and we do that by having so many rules, well-educated officials, and a cage.
So, and let me get back to that because I know you went over to the States to get certified. You went to work with a friend of both of ours, Big John McCarthy, who people would recognise, you ready, let's get it on. He's an ex-LAPD cop and been in the business forever. So you went over and there was 20 people that went up for certification, and how many you got through?
Only five. Only five, yeah.
Right.
And I was one of those five.
And were the others Australian, or you're just the only
Aussie?
I
was the only Australian. I did Big John's first course, and I was the only Australian, and there was 20 people, and I was only one of only five who passed the course.
So how intensive is that course? I mean, see, once again, people see the fighters, but they don't realise how important that person in the middle is, because we know if you're not going to recognise a concussed sort of opponent or whatever, and you're the one that's got to jump in and decide when that match is over, right? But it's taken a little bit for granted, but there's a lot of training and a lot of research and everything goes into certifying someone like you, correct?
Absolutely, and it's not just certifying. I mean, I'm a 4th degree Hapkido black belt and a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I've done kickboxing and boxing, so I know mixed martial artists. I know how it feels to get punched. I know how it feels when I'm wrestling. And so when someone's fighting in a cage, I can see what they're trying to achieve. I know how the person's feeling when they've been rocked and knocked down. The certification is very important because I started refereeing in 2007, and after a few shows, I realised I didn't know enough about mixed martial arts. And so I sort of looked around and said, who can I learn from? And there was no one in Australia. So I went to the source, Big John McCarthy. And I'm sure he was surprised when I showed up for his course. I'm sure he was surprised, but it was so informative. And I walked out of that course thinking, how am I going to know all this stuff? How am I going to remember this stuff? But over time, it all came back to me, and with my experience and training, it made a massive benefit. It was a massive benefit.
So how many other referees are there now in Australia doing what you do?
Well, there's quite a few referees. There's actually a very good referee in Melbourne who's accredited, and he got his accreditation with Herb Dean. I also trained another UFC referee, John Sharp, and he does the circuit as well as I do. But there are other referees. What we're trying to explain with refereeing is that there needs to be now a grading system or a ranking system, because just wanting to be a referee is not enough anymore. You have to be working at it. You have to be constantly reviewing your own performance as well as others. So it's ongoing. It's not just, I made it as a referee, now I can stop and rest on my laurels. I have to keep training all the time.
Finding the right martial arts insurance package doesn't have to be hard. With many policies looking similar on the surface, you need a little help. That's why it's essential to talk to the experts. Having the largest group package means negotiating power. This means the best price and policy wording for you. Martial Arts Australia is the most trusted provider. Call them for an instant quote on 03 8601 1124.
So I'm a martial artist, I want to become a referee. How would I do that here? Would I contact you?
Absolutely. Most martial artists contact me, and then I assess whether got the training that's necessary, where they've got the mindset, and then we'll do a 2-day course. And if I feel that the person is worthy, for one, we'll put them in a mentoring system. So they'll work a show with us, and they'll have a mentor to guide them. And usually they start off at the bottom, out the back change rooms, inspecting fighters' hands, watching the strapping, and then work their way up to judging and refereeing. It's a slow process, and of course Australia is a small community for mixed martial arts, compared to America. So it's a kind of a slow process, but it's definitely there, And the referees I produce are working in the UFC, and they're doing very well. In fact, a lot of my officials are working for the UFC, and that's not because I say, oh, these are great officials. They're recognised through their efforts and their hard work.
What's your thoughts on the safety of striking in MMA? Meaning boxing, we have 8-ounce gloves or whatever. You've got these small little mitts MMA fighters wear. But like if I asked Sam Greco, Sam, was a K1 kickboxer fighter who did MMA. He said, I'd rather fight MMA any day of the week as far as the safety factor, because if you do 10 rounds of boxing that goes 10 rounds, I'm going to get punched in the body and the head for 10 rounds.
Yep.
At least with MMA, right, there's a minimal strike, and then there's a clinch, there's a lot of holding.
Absolutely.
And you have the option to tap out. That's a huge difference, right?
Absolutely. There's so many aspects in MMA, and Sam hit the nail on the head straight away. They're not just standing there punching each other in the head and the body for 10, 11 rounds. And they're taking them down, they're working on the ground, they're working for submissions, they're clinching against the fence, and so there's a lot of different aspects. Plus with the gloves, they're not masking anything. So with a heavier glove, it can be masking, and it can be a dull impact. Right. And I'm sure Peter would be able to go further, Peter Lewis would be able to go further into it. Yeah. But with the MMA gloves, they do get cuts, but they're very safe. And when a fighter's concussed, we don't give them a standing 8 count in mixed martial arts. If they're concussed badly, we stop the fight.
Oh, right. That's a huge difference, right?
There's a big misconception. When the rules originally came in, it was called no holds barred, and there were no rules when the MMA first came in. But now it's evolved, and there are a lot of rules, and we're very on the ball as to what's happening, and how the fighter reacts and to certain situations.
Yeah, cool. Kids doing MMA, what's your thoughts? I know I'm putting you on the spot.
Yeah, no, that's fine. That's good.
I mean,
that's what I'm here for.
Thing, we're seeing sometimes 8 and 9-year-olds now getting in the ring MMA.
Not in New South Wales, that's for sure.
Right. Well, let me put it this way: certain gyms having their in-house and allowing that. Good or bad in your mind?
I don't fully agree with it, but we've got to look at things in perspective. Taekwondo and karate, they've been sparring like this for a long time. Just because there's interaction on the ground doesn't mean it's a bad thing. In fact, in the rules in the US where some of the kids are fighting on Indian reservations and things like that, there are a lot of rules. The kids can't strike to the head, and they can't strike to the head when they're on the ground. So there's a lot of rules, but people tend to overlook that. Look at they think it's barbaric, and so they bring that side of it in. In fact, there was a story just recently in Sydney about this exact what we're talking about. And one of the journalists there said it was barbaric. They can kick a knee to the head, which was wrong. The kids aren't allowed to kick a knee to the head. And then he was talking about how barbaric the sport is and how there's no rules. Well, that was all wrong. And even the announcer said, the sport where 2 men enter the cage with no means of escape. I've never heard anything so ridiculous in my life. If you walked into the cage, Richard, and you said, I don't want to fight, Steve, I'd say, fight's over. Thanks, Richard, for coming. See you later.
And by the way, that's what I say, at least in MMA, I as a fighter has an option to tap myself out. You can't do that in boxing or anything, right? It's usually up to the ref. Yep. I mean, you could dog it as we call it, but technically speaking, at least I'm allowed to sort of say, you know what, I've had enough.
Absolutely. And I've had fighters do that, and I mean, I've been standing over a fight, and the fighters looked at me and said, I've had enough, ref. And so immediately I stopped the fight. So, you know, the old analogy of 2 men in and 1 man leave, that's you know.
And it's great for people to understand that you as a ref are not the promoter. Promoter would probably love things to go to the extreme, but I know it's almost like a doctor, right? Your obligation is the safety of the fighter.
Absolutely.
Correct? Which is why you do so much training.
And that's why I'm here talking, and that's why I'm happy to go and talk to the ministers, because it's about the safety for the fighters and about, you know, promoting the sport as, you know, a safe sport. Yes, it's rough and tough, but it's a safe sport.
Popularity still growing, you reckon? Do you think it's going to peter off? Yeah, massive?
Massive. Yeah. Everybody watches it, everyone loves it, everyone wants to get in and do MMA. I have people come into my gym, I want to be an MMA fighter.
Do you think I often say though when kids come in, oh, I want to be an MMA fighter, and I say, well, wait till I've got your head up the side of a cage and I'm punching their head with that little glove. Right, there's a lot of them think they want to be MMA fighters.
Of course they do.
But it's what's happening now, isn't it, in our martial arts environment? It's very exciting.
Once again, it's like any sport. You know, I want to be a pro golfer. I can't just walk onto the course and start hitting golf balls and be a pro golfer. You know, they're training. They're in there day in, day out, training in the bunkers. The same for mixed martial artists. You know, I get a lot of kids coming in, I want to be an MMA fighter. We wrestle with them a bit. We take them through a jiu-jitsu program. Eventually they go, wow, this is hard enough. You know, I don't know if I really want to be an MMA fighter. You know.
Last question then, from your position as a teacher and a coach, aside from referee, how relevant now is BJJ as one of the essential ingredients to become an MMA fighter? I mean, there's a lot of talk that if you're a good amateur wrestler, for instance, with the base and skill and stamina they have, takedowns and everything, that's good enough, along with a bit of Muay Thai and striking skills. What are your thoughts?
Oh, absolutely. Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is still an essential part. You know, people still get caught, you know, while they're throwing down a punch within a guard, they still get caught in an armbar or a triangle. So there's still that side of it. Of course, everybody's learning it now, so they're countering those techniques.
Yeah, no secrets anymore.
Exactly,
right?
No secrets, you know. But that's the evolution of the sport. That's what makes it so interesting and so popular. It's evolving.
Right. Wonderful. All right, we better wrap it up there.
Thank you,
Richard, so
Richard.
much. Again, so great to have you on Kapow TV. And again, that's what the show is all about. We just want to inform the community, inform other martial arts and people out there as to what we do. In this case, it's what you do. And I think it's such an important thing, because the more informed we are as a community, the better we are to have an opinion, an informed opinion, and then hopefully be part of that decision making.
Absolutely.
So, great. Thank you, Steve.
Thank you,
Appreciate
Richard.
it.
Thank you for having me.